Evelyn pressed her
This place
forehead to the
holds
bus
so many
window as
memories.
the city rolled past in a blur of gray streets and
I
bright
wish I
banners.
could forget some of them.
Congratulations, class of 20, the signs read, with gold letters and smiling faces. She smiled too, small and proud. Today was Clara's day. The day every late-night shift, every aching back, every quiet prayer finally became worth it. She wore her best black dress, the one she kept wrapped in tissue at the back of the closet. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and carefully ironed. She had polished her old shoes until they shone in the kitchen light. She braided her hair the way Clara used to like when she was little. On the seat beside her lay a single white lily in newspaper, the only flower she could afford. She thought of buying two, then counted coins again, and decided one was enough. It would be enough. When the bus sighed to a stop near the university, a light rain had started. Evelyn opened her small umbrella and stepped into a crowd of bright umbrellas, glossy heels, and crisp suits. Cameras flashed near the gate. A reporter laughed and said, "Get the dean next." People hurried past, holding programs and talking about residencies, honors, and fancy dinners. Evelyn tucked the lily closer to her chest and followed the signs. At the security table, a young volunteer smiled without looking up. "Family section?" "Straight ahead, ma'am." Evelyn nodded, shy. She walked slowly, trying not to slip. The campus looked like a postcard: green lawns, white tents, big stage, a tall arch with the school crest. She imagined little Clara running across that grass with scraped knees and a proud grin. "I'll be a doctor someday, Mom," she used to say, tapping her chest. "You'll see," Evelyn had said. "I already see." She spotted her daughter before Clara saw her. There she was, white gown, blue stole, the cap tilted just right. Beautiful. Her cheeks glowed, her smile big and glossy for the cameras. She laughed with classmates and with a sleek young man in a suit, Ethan, the fiancé Evelyn had met once in a loud restaurant where the chairs were too soft and the words too quick. He was at ease here. Everyone looked at home. Evelyn held the lily tighter and took a step forward. "Mrs. Turner?" Ethan appeared first, slipping between umbrellas with an easy grin. "Hi. You made it." "Great." He glanced over his shoulder toward the cameras. "Listen, super quick. Clara's a little stressed. Media's all over. We just want things smooth." He lowered his voice. "The press loves a clean story, you know? Top student, first in her program to publish, big fellowship. I just want to tell her I'm proud," Evelyn said. Her voice was soft but steady. "Of course," he said, smile glued on. "Let me get her." Clara turned when he called her name. For a heartbeat, her face lit up the way it used to when she ran from the school bus. "Mom!" She came close, and Evelyn smelled the sweet floral of her perfume. "You came." Her eyes scanned the dress, the shoes, the umbrella with a bent rib. Something in her gaze tightened. "I brought you a flower," Evelyn said, lifting the lily. "It's not much, but—" Clara glanced past her toward the cameras. "Mom," she whispered, "can we talk fast? They're about to start interviews." Evelyn nodded. "Of course." Clara leaned in, speaking through a smile. "Could you wait by the side gate? Just until the ceremony starts? The press is watching everything, and I don't want them to ask weird questions about—" She stopped and swallowed. "About home. You understand, right? It's complicated." Evelyn's hand closed around the stem until it creaked. "You don't want them to see me." No, it's not that," Clara said quickly. "It's just image. They're promoting stories, Mom. The hospital people are here. Please. I'll come find you right after. I promise." The rain grew a little heavier, dotting Clara's gown with tiny gray stars. Evelyn looked at her daughter's careful hair, her bright eyes, the hopeful life she had built. She thought of rent money counted on the kitchen table, of lunch boxes packed in the dark, of little shoes dried by the heater after storms. She felt the ache in her knees and the softer ache behind her ribs. "All right, dear," she said. The words tasted like old coins. "I'll wait." "Thank you." Clara kissed her cheek quickly, light as a paper touch. "You're the best. I'll be right back after the dean's speech." She turned to Ethan. "Let's go." Then she was gone again, swallowed by light and cameras and a future with smooth edges. Evelyn walked to the side gate as asked. The grass there was muddy, and the tree above her shook in the rain. Her umbrella gave a small sigh as the bent rib snapped. She closed it and let the rain have her. Water slid down her temples and into her collar. The lily trembled in her hand. Across the lawn, under the tent, the band rehearsed the opening notes. Families squeezed together in the dry rows, passing tissues and phones. A volunteer came by with programs. Family section's there, he said kindly. Thank you, she answered, but she didn't move. She could just make out the stage. The dean stepped to the microphone. Laughter, then applause. Names would be read soon. They would call Clara Turner, and Evelyn would clap from here. It would still count. She had promised herself, long ago in a dim apartment with a leaky window, that she would see this day. Promises have weight. They keep you standing. A couple near the fence glanced at her. The woman frowned. She's soaked, she whispered to her husband. He shrugged. She'll move if she wants to. Evelyn looked down at her dress, the rain darkening it to a deeper black. She smoothed the fabric with her free hand and lifted her chin. The world could think what it liked. She was here for one person only. Memories kept her warm. Clara at 5, sticky with lollipop, asleep on Evelyn's chest after a long shift. Clara at 11, furious at AB+, slamming her bedroom door. Evelyn sliding a note under it that said, "One mark is not your future." Clara at 17, eyes shining as she opened the acceptance letter, whispering, "We did it, Mom," though it was mostly her. They had been a team, two people rowing in the same small boat across a wide, restless sea. A wind pushed the rain sideways. The lily's petals quivered and one bent. Evelyn straightened it gently and cupped the bloom with her hand. "Hold on," she murmured, and she wasn't sure if she meant the flower or herself. Music swelled. The graduates began to file in, a slow river of white and blue. Clara was somewhere in the middle, taller than many, perfect posture, the future standing on her shoulders like sunlight. Evelyn's heart swelled and hurt at the same time. She clapped softly for them all, palms wet, a small sound swallowed by the storm. Then, under the distant thud of drums, another sound crept into the air, a low, steady tremor, like a giant heartbeat. Some people looked up. The band faltered for a moment. The rain carried the sound closer, heavier, a rhythm you felt in your chest before you named it. Evelyn didn't turn right away. She kept her eyes on the line of graduates and the place where she would see her daughter's face again. But the sound grew until even the trees seemed to listen, and the crowd began to murmur, heads tilting toward the gray sky. She tightened her grip on the lily and finally looked up. The sound swelled into a roar. It wasn't thunder. It was too steady, too sure. People under the tent pointed toward the clouds. Programs lifted like small white wings in nervous hands. The dean paused at the podium, then tried to smile and keep speaking. The band stopped playing. The world held its breath. A dark shape slid out of the low gray sky. The helicopter came in slow, the blades beating the rain into mist. Wind rolled across the lawn, pushing at dresses and caps, snapping the edges of banners. A child near the aisle clapped, delighted. Most adults did not. They were confused, then curious, then a little afraid. Security guards started to jog along the fence. "Please remain seated." Someone called through a handheld speaker. "Please remain calm." Calm was not what people felt. Camera crews hurried toward the edge of the field, shouting to each other over the noise. Phones rose in a forest of hands. Evelyn did not move from the gate. The rain whipped sideways now, soaking her dress to her skin. She held the broken umbrella at her side like a stick that had nowhere left to help. The white lily shook in her hand. The helicopter hovered, then dropped lower, lower, like a heavy bird choosing a branch. As it descended, Evelyn's mind flashed back to another wind, another terrible sky. She was 21 and bone-tired, standing in a place that smelled of dust and diesel, where the air hummed with danger. There had been a helicopter then too, and men shouting her name, and a boy whose blood would not stop. She remembered the weight of a small hand in hers and the stubborn voice in her head that said, "Not yet. Stay. Finish." She pushed the memory away gently, as if tucking a child back into sleep. The helicopter's landing skids touched the campus grass with a soft bounce. The blades kept turning, sending sheets of rain across the field like curtains. A side door slid open. A man in a dark coat leaned out, checked the ground, and gestured. Another figure stepped forward inside the cabin. For a second, all Evelyn could see was the bright stripe of medals on a chest and a brim of a cap. The dean spoke again, his voice thin and brave. "Ladies and gentlemen, please stay seated. We'll resume the ceremony in a moment." People did not sit. They stood, necks craned, 1,000 eyes trying to translate the scene into something ordinary. It refused to become ordinary. 2 officers jumped down first, scanning the area. They spoke into radios. The third person remained inside, shadowed, waiting. Then, with a sure step, he came out. Tall, straight-backed, hat low against the rain, shoulders squared as if the weather had to make room for him. The metals on his chest were bright even in the gray day. His mouth was set in a line that was not unfriendly, only focused. He looked like a man used to moving quickly through storms. He did not look at the stage. He did not look at the dean or the cameras. He looked past them all, across the field, toward the far gate where a single woman stood alone in the rain. Evelyn felt that look land on her like a hand on her shoulder. She did not know why her chest warmed and tightened at the same time. A small part of her wanted to step behind the tree, to hide the broken umbrella and the old dress and the way her hair clung to her cheeks. Another part of her, the part that had held frightened soldiers' faces and counted heartbeats in the dark, stayed very still. The man in uniform started walking. The officers kept pace at his sides, trying to guide him toward the stage, but he shook his head once, and they fell a half-step back. He moved with the patience of someone who chooses his path, and then simply takes it. Mud splashed on his polished shoes. He did not look down. Near the front row, Clara turned. The wind pushed at her gown. Her cap trembled on its tassel. She followed the path of every other gaze. When she saw the uniformed man, a nervous smile flickered onto her face, the kind people wear when they hope a complication is still a surprise. She looked for the dean. She looked for Ethan. She did not yet look for her mother. Ethan leaned toward her and said something she could not hear. He touched her elbow, meaning comfort, meaning control. She pulled her arm gently away. The man in uniform kept walking, not fast, not slow, just sure. The crowd parted for him, bodies leaning aside without thinking, like grass making way for river water. At the gate, a volunteer glanced at Evelyn, and then at the approaching officer. His eyes widened. "Ma'am," he said to her under his breath, as if they shared a secret he had only now discovered. Do you need a seat? I can take you." "I'm all right," Evelyn said. Her voice was quiet but firm. She put the broken umbrella down carefully against the fence and held the lily with both hands. Rain tapped the petals like fingertips. She did not wipe her face. Let the rain hide what it wanted. The man drew closer. Evelyn could see the lines at the corners of his eyes now, the kind etched not by frowning, but by squinting into far places. She saw the way he carried his shoulders, as if they had once borne weight and had learned to bear it well. Something in her chest shifted, a long, soft click of recognition. She had met many men in uniform in her life, and most passed out of memory like footsteps in sand. A few stayed. One had a laugh like gravel. One had a fear he hid by telling jokes. One had eyes that watered in wind, no matter how hard he tried. The general, she realized he was a general by the star on his cap, reached the fence and stopped. For a breath, he did nothing. He studied her. Not her dress. Not her shoes. Her face. He looked as if he were placing her in a map of a long-ago night and finding at last the right road. Across the lawn, the ceremony seemed to shrink into a quiet painting. The dean's paper notes hung limp in his hand. The band clutched their instruments like travelers holding luggage in a sudden storm. The students' white gowns made a bright river that had stopped flowing. Clara's mouth was open just slightly. She had finally followed everyone else's gaze to the one small place that mattered. Evelyn waited. The rain filled the empty spaces between heartbeats. She felt her pulse in her throat, in her fingers around the flower's stem. Her mind offered her a small, steady sentence. Whatever this is, meet it standing. The general lifted one gloved hand and removed his cap. His hair was iron gray, pressed flat by the rain. He took one step closer to the gate, close enough that she could see the small scar that cut through his right eyebrow, an old white thread in his skin. His eyes were the color of cold river water and just as clear. He opened his mouth to speak. And in that suspended second, before his words found the air, before the crowd could decide what this moment would mean, before Clara could take a step toward her or away, Evelyn felt the whole day tilt, ever so slightly, toward something she had not planned and would not run from. He spoke her name first, slow, careful, as if he were setting something precious down on the table.
What do you
Evelyn
mean?
Turner.
Where is my
The sound
son?
moved through the rain like a bell. Evelyn felt it settle in her chest. She did not answer right away. She only nodded once. The general straightened, brought his heels together, and lifted his right hand to his brow. He held the salute without hurry, without show. The field seemed to lean toward him. Even the rain seemed quieter for a breath. "For 15 years, he said, lowering his hand, I have wanted to do that." Murmurs rose under the tent. Phones tilted higher. The dean took a step forward, then stopped, as if he had walked into an invisible wall of respect. Security guards hovered at the edges and then slowly backed away. The general looked at Evelyn, and a tired warmth touched his stern face. "You don't remember me," he said. "That makes sense. I was one of many. We were dirty and scared and not very brave that night." "I remember the night," Evelyn said softly. "I remember too many nights." Her voice shook, then steadied. "I don't remember all the faces. I remember the blood. And the hands that reached for mine." He gave a small, grateful nod. "That was us." He turned, raising his voice so the audience could hear without shouting. 15 years ago, our convoy was ambushed on a narrow road outside a village. We had wounded on the ground, we had fire from the hills, and we had minutes, maybe less. Evac was delayed. Confusion everywhere. And in the middle of that storm, a field nurse refused to leave. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the lily. The petals shook. She steadied them with her thumb. "She crawled from man to man," the general continued, tying tourniquets with her own scarf when the bag ran out. She made a chest seal from plastic and tape. She kept a boy awake by tapping his cheek and counting with him, 1 to 100 and back again, because she knew the dark would take him if he slept. She put me on my feet when my leg wouldn't hold, and when I fell, she lifted me again. She would not get into the last truck until the last man did. A low sound moved through the crowd, not quite a gasp, not yet applause. Something like all learning to breathe. Evelyn shook her head, embarrassed. "There were others," she said. "Medics, villagers, drivers. It was never just me." "There are always others," the general agreed. "But there is always one who decides how the night will end." He looked at her the way a soldier looks at a flag. "That was you." He reached into his coat and pulled out a weathered, sealed envelope. "For years," he said, "I looked for you. Your name was scrawled wrong on 2 reports and missing on another. A young medic wrote it right in a diary that survived a flood. That diary found me last winter. Your name, Evelyn Turner, shone like a flare in the dark." He glanced at the tent, at the banner that said convocation, at the programs in people's hands. 2 months ago, our foundation funded a scholarship here. I read about a top graduate named Clara Turner, raised by a single mother. The biography said, "My mother worked day and night. She never talks about herself." I took a chance. He smiled a little. I called the dean. He didn't call me back. The dean flushed and looked at his shoes. "So I flew here today when I learned the schedule. I hoped I was not too late." He stepped closer to the fence. "Mrs. Turner, we are not good as a nation at saying thank you at the right time. Let me try to say it now." He opened the envelope, hands careful despite the rain. Inside was a small, polished medal on a ribbon and a folded letter sealed with a blue stamp. He did not reach past the fence. He held them at heart level, as if an offering. Evelyn did not take them yet. She looked at his face, the scar in his eyebrow, the water clinging to his lashes. She saw a much younger man under the gray, leaning against a wheel well, insisting he could walk when he could not, swearing at the sky so he would not swear at his fear. She felt something old unlock, a door she had closed to keep the wind out. "You don't owe me this," she said. "I owe you more," he answered. 30 men went home. 30 families had fathers and brothers, because you stayed. I met a boy from that night last month. He is not a boy now. He coaches Little League. His daughter made him a birthday card with crayon stars on it. That card has your hands in it. The sentence struck the field like lightning, not loud but bright. Someone sobbed once, openly. The bandleader put a hand over his mouth. A professor whispered, "My God." Clara took a step forward from the line of graduates. Her shoes sank in the wet grass. She had not cried yet. Her face was too shocked for tears. Now her eyes filled slowly, the way rain fills a cup left on a porch. "Mom," she said, the word thin and breaking. Evelyn turned toward her. Their eyes met across the distance. For a heartbeat, there was no crowd, no cameras, no rain. Only the thin string that had tied them since the day Clara first cried in a hospital room and a nurse had said, "She knows you." The general put his cap to his chest. He faced the crowd again, but his words were for Clara as much as for anyone. Heroes do not look like the movies. Sometimes they look like women who ride buses in the rain. Sometimes they look like mothers who say nothing because pride is quieter than noise. He lifted the medal once more, not to display it, but to honor the space it created. "Remember who lifted you here." Something changed then, something in the crowd, in the weather, in the air itself. The silence broke not with chatter, but with the first hesitant clap. A student started it, cheeks wet, hands awkward. Then another. Then two more. The sound spread like a small fire that learned it had wood enough to grow. Within seconds, the field was thunder, real thunder now made of hands and hearts. Evelyn's shoulders shook. She did not bow. She did not cover her face. She stood the way she had stood in those hard places long ago, upright, gentle, unafraid to be seen. The dean finally moved, stumbling a little on the wet step. "Mrs. Turner," he said into a microphone that squealed and then obeyed. "On behalf of the university, his voice failed. He swallowed. "On behalf of this school, on behalf of my own small courage, I offer you our deepest thanks." He turned to the general. "And to you, sir, for reminding us what this day is for." Clara began to walk toward the fence. The other graduates parted for her, their gowns brushing like wings. Ethan stayed where he was, hands useless at his sides, eyes flicking between the cameras and the woman he had underestimated. The general looked at Evelyn one last time, and the formality left his face. "I know you did not come here for this," he said quietly. "You came to watch your daughter become a doctor. May I make a request?" Evelyn nodded. "When she takes her oath," he said, "stand where you can see her, and let her see you." Evelyn looked past him to Clara, who was still walking, now almost running, rain beads flying from her cap tassel. The lily in Evelyn's hand had lost a petal. The flower was smaller, not ruined. She lifted her chin, and something like light rose from her eyes. "All right," she said. "I will." And as Clara reached the fence, breathless, shaking, ashamed and brave at once, the world that had humiliated a mother only minutes before began to turn toward her, like flowers turning toward a sudden, honest sun. Clara reached the fence as if the ground itself were pulling her forward.
This moment.
She stopped a breath
Thank you
away,
so much.
rain
I
shining
couldn't
on
have
her
done it
cheeks
without
like
you.
glass beads. For a second she could not find a single word. She only looked at her mother the way a thirsty person looks at water. "Mom," she said at last, a small, cracked sound. "I told you to wait in the rain." Evelyn's mouth softened. "You asked me to wait," she said gently. "And I did. I have always waited where you needed me." Clara shook her head, shame rising in her throat. She took the fence post in both hands, as if steadying herself. "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid of what people would think. Afraid the story would look messy. I forgot the only story that matters is the truth." The general stepped back, giving them a pocket of quiet in the center of the noise. The crowd kept clapping, but softer now, as if even applause should not intrude. The dean signaled the band to hold. Camera crews lowered their lenses a little, drawn in despite themselves by something too human to exploit. Evelyn reached through the gap in the fence and touched Clara's wet cheek with 2 fingers. "You worked hard, sweetheart. The world is loud around success. It can make a person deaf." She smiled the old kitchen table smile that had patched 1,000 small hurts. "I'm still here." Clara's breath hitched. She took off her graduation cap with clumsy hands and set it on the fence. Then she lifted the blue and white gown from her shoulders and, without a word, draped it over Evelyn's. The fabric clung dark with rain, but it was warm from Clara's body. "Stand with me," Clara said. "Please." A guard unlatched the side gate. The general nodded to him, and the hinges groaned open. Evelyn hesitated only long enough to gather the lily and tuck the broken umbrella under her arm. Then she walked through. They crossed the wet grass together, mother and daughter, shoulder to shoulder, toward the wide steps of the stage. Students stepped aside, some with hands over their hearts. A girl with freckles whispered, "That's her," and smiled like a secret shared. Ethan took a half step as if to help and then thought better of it, the look on his face something like learning. The dean met them at the stairs, eyes bright behind rain-splashed glasses. "Mrs. Turner, Clara," he said, voice respectful now, "we would be honored if you stood here." He moved the lectern aside, making space at the center of the stage. The general stayed below, capped to chest, a quiet sentry. He did not climb. This was not his part. The band found the first notes of the oath's music again, slow, steady, like a bridge built one plank at a time. The faculty lined up. The students turned to face the words they had practiced alone in dorm rooms and study halls. Clara squeezed her mother's hand, and Evelyn felt, with a fierce, tender ache, the smaller hand that used to fit there. When the dean invited the class to raise their right hands, Clara raised hers and kept her left wrapped around her mother's fingers. Her voice did not shake. The oath poured out, clear promises to do no harm, to serve the sick, to listen, to remember the people behind the charts. As she spoke, her gaze kept returning to Evelyn, as if measuring each vow against the life that had carried her to this place. Evelyn mouthed the words she recognized from long ago, the ones she had whispered over stretchers and in crowded tents. First, do no harm. Protect. Stay. When it ended, the applause was a wave. But beneath it, the quieter ceremony unfolded. Clara turned to the microphone and, without looking at the cameras, asked, "May I say one thing?" The dean nodded. "I made a mistake today," Clara said, voice steady and small all at once. "I forgot who taught me what being a healer really means. My mother showed me before any professor did. She kept people alive when the world fell apart. She kept me alive when our world fell apart." She glanced at Evelyn. "If any good comes from me, it walked here in her shoes first." A hush moved across the tent, a sound like the wind deciding to listen. The general lifted his face and allowed himself a proud, private smile. Ethan cleared his throat, a man rearranging himself. He stepped forward just enough to be seen by the two women, and no more. "Mrs. Turner," he said, careful and sincere, "I'm sorry. I thought I understood what mattered. I didn't. If you'll let me, I'd like to try again. With both of you." Evelyn studied him, not unkind. "Trying again is a good start," she said. "It's how most real things are made." The dean surprised everyone then. He took the microphone back, turned to the general, and bowed slightly. "General, sir, would you join us for one more recognition?" The general shook his head once, as if to say it was not his day. The dean insisted kindly with a gesture. He came. On stage, the general did not pin the medal over headlines. He placed the letter first in Evelyn's palm, the paper warm from being held close, and said, soft enough for only a few to hear, "This is from families, not from an office." Then he set the small medal in Clara's hands. "Hold this for her," he said. "You'll understand its weight the longer you carry it." Clara gripped it as if it were a heartbeat. A reporter tried to shout a question. The dean raised a hand and, for the first time all day, looked like the leader everyone wanted him to be. "No questions," he said. "Not today." The ceremony resumed at last, but it was different now, gentler. Names were called. Cheers rose and fell like rain on roofs. When they reached Clara Turner, the entire field stood. Clara walked across the stage with her mother's arm in hers. She bowed her head to receive the hood, then turned and placed it for a second around Evelyn's shoulders. They laughed through tears at their own daring, and the crowd laughed with them, happy to be told what joy looks like. Afterward, people came, not to ask for a quote, but to say thank you. A professor pressed a napkin into Evelyn's hand and whispered, "I should have called my father more." A young medic stood very straight and said, "Ma'am, you are why I chose this." The freckled girl hugged Clara and asked if she could meet the woman who taught her to stand in storms. They took pictures, but they were different pictures. No poses, only proof. When the tents were finally emptying, the general found them one last time near the gate where the day had split. The rain had softened to a mist, and the world smelled like wet grass and new plans. "I'll be going," he said. "There's a small ceremony next month at the base. It's quiet. No cameras. Families only. If you'd come, I think some men would sleep better after shaking your hand." Evelyn looked at Clara. Clara nodded immediately. "We'll be there," she said, and meant the we. The general put his cap on. "Good." He paused, eyes warm. "And Dr. Turner, your first patient will not be a headline. She'll be someone's mother, someone's child. Remember this rain when you meet her." He touched the brim and went, leaving them with the soft thud of rotor blades and a feeling like a door opening onto clear air. They walked to the bus stop instead of the faculty reception. Clara held the umbrella above both of them, though the rain had nearly stopped. The gown still lay across Evelyn's shoulders, heavy, comforting, a borrowed future that fit them both. On the ride home, Clara rested her head on her mother's shoulder the way she used to after kindergarten. She turned the medal over in her hands, reading the small letters again and again. "Will you tell me about that night?" she asked, not as a reporter, not as a doctor, but as a daughter. "If you'd like," Evelyn said. "And then you'll tell me about the first time you held a life in your hands and felt it choose to stay." They smiled without looking at each other, the way people do when something true sits quietly between them. At the apartment door, Clara stopped. "Mom," she said, "I want the world to know who you are. But if you want it private, I'll keep it private. You choose." Evelyn thought of loud rooms and quiet rooms, of the way pride can be a parade or a prayer. "Let's keep today ours," she said. "Tomorrow, we can see what belongs to everyone." Clara unlocked the door. The room smelled like coffee and clean floors. On the table sat 2 mugs and a plate of the cookies Evelyn baked when nerves kept her hands busy. Clara laughed softly. "You expected to celebrate," she said. "I expected to try," Evelyn answered. They ate 1 cookie each and saved the rest. The lily, missing a petal, leaned in a jar by the window. It did not look broken. It looked like it had weathered something and was still a lily. Night came quick after the rain. Streetlights clicked on, offering their small, patient suns. Clara hung her gown on the back of a chair to dry. She took the medal and set it beside the jar, then slipped the letter beneath safe. "Tomorrow," she said, "I start as a doctor." "Tomorrow," Evelyn said, "you start as my girl who became one." They turned off the light and stood for a moment in the doorway to the small balcony, listening to the city breathe. No helicopter now, no crowd. Just the soft proof of a day that had turned itself right. Clara reached for Evelyn's hand, and Evelyn met it halfway, as she always had. And together they looked out into the new, honest dark, ready for the kind of work that begins after applause.